Welcome to Intimacy Insights. We're therapists with a mission: make sex and relationships better. So let's get some insights today. So, Sarah, our topic today, of course, is how to spot a narcissist. So tell me, what is narcissism?
What is narcissism? Well, narcissism is not our ex who we hate. Narcissism is something that is diagnosed by people like us. When have you heard words like buzzwords, Kristen, that are like taking off in TikTok world or social media world? Like narcissism is one of them. What else have you heard?
Everyone is a narcissist, or someone I don't like is a narcissist or something. I think it's definitely overused. I mean, there's other but buzzwords in social media. We have like the whole, I think this is an older one, but the crack chicken, because crack chicken is a recipe that is so good it tastes like crack, right? People saying, "Oh, I'm such an alcoholic because I enjoy alcohol." And so, people will say bipolar, I'm so bipolar just because I have a range of human emotions, which is a very human thing to experience. And so, like, I think we want to go over those because, we don't diagnose people unless we've been trained to do so. Even you and I mean, we're like independently licensed therapists. And we don't diagnose our own people. We only diagnose our clients and stuff. So with that being said, are going to go over some of that criteria for narcissism, I think, just so that people, especially in the dating world, with friends and family, can look and see, okay, where are these red flags of narcissism? And we can know exactly what that looks like, but
Mhm.
not be trying to overdiagnose or really diagnosing ourselves. We don't want to do that either.
Right. And, oftentimes I think what's hard is that some people know a little bit about narcissism. And so they're like, oh, yes, absolutely. That person meets diagnostic criteria. And you and I both know that it's really difficult to actually meet diagnostic criteria and be an actual narcissist. You can have the tendencies and meet some of that criteria, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a full-blown narcissist.
And going over a little bit of the criteria, so we know this is narcissism, or being a narcissist is from that narcissistic personality disorder. It's from our DSM-5, this is our diagnostic manual and things. And so we know that narcissism shows up as grandiose behavior. I mean, we know that these people are creating realities for other people. And they're very charming at first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially the overt ones, right? The ones that are seeking that attention and like the center of attention where you go and everybody wants to be around them and wants to be their friend.
We know it's hard. I don't think there's a timeline of when they'll start to show, that explosive behavior or critical behavior or anything. I mean, there's not a specific timeline, but we know. So initially you meet someone, they're, pretty great and all that kind of stuff. But after some time, we start to see like some signs of that narcissism creeping in. And so that can take the form of, I mean, crossing boundaries, I think, right? You say, like, this is my boundary right here, you need to follow it. And then, of course, they'll step over little bit by little bit. And sometimes we call that the opening the closed door technique, or, the salesman technique of kind of, moving in and, trying to break those boundaries little by little. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see like some insults happening, some boundary crossing happening, what they call negging, the idea that we're giving a backhanded compliment kind of thing. You're really cute for a short girl or something like that.
What does grandiose behavior mean?
Okay. So what does grandiose behavior mean? Well, I mean, that's described, right, as like a condescension. Like, so we'll see like a lot of like name dropping, like I know this person, or I'm so skilled at this, like giving an illusion of perfection, perhaps, of like just, I mean, truly how great they are. That's the other thing. So about narcissists, I mean, we can see that, I mean, I'm gonna call it, going back to biology class, like a parasitic relationship where someone is trying to get into some kind of relationship, whether that be romantic, friendship, whatever, and they are targeting people that they see as higher status. And so who knows what that could look like? Maybe that's a really successful counselor. Maybe that is someone in a governmental position in some way, maybe someone, a police officer, someone who maybe is of kind of this higher status, they perceive that's a higher status. And then that's interesting because we'll start talking about the trauma bond, I'm sure, in just a second here. But then what they will do is get with this person to elevate their own status,
Mhm.
and then they will start to pick apart that person that they've gotten into the relationship with so that they can kind of elevate themselves. It's this parasitic relationship where the narcissist will feed off of this person in a way emotionally and then kind of break down their self-esteem. And that's
Mm.
like real bad. That's a real bad thing. I mean, because then we're left when, if or when the relationship is over, I mean, the narcissist will discard that person, and then that person is left with questioning their sense of reality, a really low self-esteem, sometimes like a victim blaming of themselves, of like, how could I have let this happen? How could I have gotten to this relationship and all these kinds of things? And so, and unfortunately, this is a lot more common, I think, than people realize. I mean, but that's the whole thing of narcissists. Like, hurt people hurt people. They don't got the insight. They don't get the treatment.
It's really great that you talked about how narcissists will look for somebody of higher status because oftentimes there's this facade or people say like, oh, how could you have fell for that, right? Or like, why were you so weak that a narcissist could do that to you? And I think that that's not it at all. It has nothing to do with being a weak person that you're targeted. It's more for that status acquirement that you talked about than it is that you don't have your stuff together. It's more that you do and that they're seeking to be like you, because we see that mirroring that happens a lot, right? And that happens in the beginning stages, and that's something we'll talk about, like the trauma bonding. So there's 7 stages of it specifically. The first one, love bombing. Everything is great. You're perfect. This is where you see the mirroring often. And you're like, wow, this person really gets me. They have the same likes as me. They have the same dislikes as me.
With that love bombing, that's definitely how they start to get in there, of just being very agreeable to try to, build rapport, I think.
Mhm. And not just with you, right? They're going to do that with the people around you too. They're going to really try to charm those people. And that kind of goes into that trust and dependency, which is number 2 in the 7 stages. And they are going to show up for you in ways that you don't expect them to show up for you. They're going to um, come through. You can trust them with your trauma. They're going to share some of their trauma with you at some point. And I think this is where they use that manipulation tactic to gain that trust and dependency in the relationship.
Right. And vulnerability is an opportunity for control. So, yes, they are
Mhm.
going to dig into that, and they're going to try to get all that information to do really, yeah, I like that you brought that up, to do really nice things to wedge themselves into your friends and family, because later they're going to isolate you from them.
Yeah, and not capable of love, also not capable of like empathy. And so they're going to be taking you through this, and once they gain your trust and your dependency, they're going to start nitpicking and criticizing at this point. And so now you feel like you have this person who knows you, who gets you, who really understands you. And then they're going to start kind of like taking things apart. Like, oh, I really like how you did that, but maybe like that backhanded compliment that you talked about, that negging. Like, I really like how you cook dinner. Maybe next time you cook the chicken a little bit less because it was a little dry, right? So they're going to start really little with this criticism. It's not going to be overt and very like your friends are not going to catch on. Nobody's going to really see this happening except you. And you're going to really start self doubting at this point.
And that's the part, like we said, the parasitic relationship where they find the high status person, and then that's when they start picking them apart. This is where definitely the control starts to come in. We'll see, like, the isolation, and then, this is when affection, the frequency of affection lowers. If you go a whole year without someone telling you that they love you or giving you a hug, and then sometimes they do it, like, then that makes you very dependent upon that. Actually, a lot of research that talks about that, about how, okay, so maybe we've heard of conditioning and all that kind of stuff. We know there's classical, operational, and or operant rather. Basically, it's all behavioral conditioning. And so we know with that, that there are things that we can do. If we offer consistent reinforcement, every time you go to work, I give you a paycheck, then okay, that's going to motivate your behavior. That just makes sense as part of conditioning. But if you go to work and I only give you a paycheck sometimes, and it's random. You might come to work and then, for a few weeks and I give you like a paycheck for, 2 weeks and then I just stop for like a whole month and then I give you another paycheck after that. So what we call that is intermittent reinforcement. And that actually has a very weird effect on the brain. You would think if randomly it was being reinforced, then I wouldn't want to do that anymore. But actually, what that makes me do is I want to do it way more. And so then that leaves us as the person in the relationship with the narcissist. They give us a little bit of affection. It's random, it's minimal.
And some people might have termed this or coined this as breadcrumbing. And that's something that we might hear on social media or something. And that's where they do that intermittent reinforcement and just give you a little bit here. And then you're constantly waiting and hoping. And this is where that does increase that dependency on them because you're dependent for your self worth at this point on what they give you. To like the biggest term I think that people use with narcissism is gaslighting. And so that's the next one. That's number 4 in the trauma bond stages. And gaslighting, like verbatim, an emotional and mental manipulation strategy to make the victim, you or whoever is the targeted victim, question their experiences, not just their experiences, but their perception of them and their own beliefs. It is so sad to see patients come in who are in this portion of the trauma bond. This is the most difficult thing that I deal with as a therapist, is trying to be the voice of reason for people who are being gaslit into thinking that they're somebody that they're not. And or even after the narcissistic relationship, that discard happens, which we'll talk about coming up, there's this intense inability to know yourself anymore after a narcissistic relationship, and it comes from the gaslighting.
Trauma bonds aren't just with narcissists. I think trauma bonds can be with quite a lot of people who are unhealed. And so we see it most often with narcissism. The second point about that is, you think about this illusion that is being fostered. I mean, and what that really looks like is, the narcissist goes out to a meal with the person they're trying to victimize, and they're not just considering everything that they are doing, how they are eating, how they are presenting themselves for the person across from them. They are considering how the waiters and waitresses perceive them, how the other guests in the restaurant perceive them. And that's quite a lot of building up that illusion. The gaslighting, that's a lot of lies to keep track of. And so eventually what's going to happen is they break. That's where the explosive, conflicts and things come in and a lot of the insults. So like you'll see that pretty quickly because people can't keep that up, that illusion forever.
No, that's good. That's good. And you kind of stepped into the next one, which is number 5, addiction. And you literally become addicted to this person's reinforcement that we talked about, to what they do for you, with you, around you, giving you attention. But it's so scientific. It's so crazy to me. Some of the hormones that are released in these trauma bond relationships are oxytocin, dopamine, and cortisol. And cortisol is released when someone is being hurt or abandoned, but then we want to like seek that in these narcissistic relationships. And this is what makes it so hard to break that trauma bond, is because it's not just an emotional thing, but it's actually a physical, scientific situation that's happening with you. Number 6, loss of self, right? You lose your identity in this person, in this relationship. And you're right, that healing has to happen after you've gone through like the whiplash of the love bombing, the gaslighting. And then you're like, who am I? What is this? If I was worthy, this person would still love me the way they did at the beginning.
Right. And, not to mention they've isolated you from everyone, and so friends, family, whatever. And so now it's like you're left with that. I've lost my sense of identity. I've lost my relationships, my support system, all these things. And so, I think there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to. So now, we've talked a little bit about how do we see that trauma bond and how, I think there's more to say on red flags. I think there's more to say, of course, on How do
Mhm.
we leave a relationship with someone who is abusive in this way? And so how do we heal from that? I mean, there's so many topics, to cover with this because it's a super dynamic issue. So,
Absolutely.
hopefully this gave people a little bit of information about what to look for, what those trauma bonds look like. And I'm sure we'll be covering a lot of those topics in the future.
Yes, yes, we need to. Absolutely.
All right. Well, then, hopefully that was helpful to everyone. That's our time for now. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day and be well.